Welcome to Business Talk Sister Rock. I'm Becca, and today's podcast episode is a building update, part 2. Last week, if you were with me, you were hearing a little bit about the fact that we've been learning a lot of stuff with our big project of taking an abandoned building and making it into a space that is usable. Specifically, the main floor is an art gallery. And the question that I want to talk about today is, why an art gallery? Why did we decide to go with that? And I'm really excited to share a lot about this with you. So I would say this conversation about why we decided that was what we wanted to put in a space dates back to actually quite a few years ago when I had gone to a conference in which a guy from Lanesboro, Minnesota, came to speak about what they had done in their community. And I thought it was fantastic. They started with one building and they built an art gallery, art center, come in, be welcomed, have lots of stuff about the community. And it kind of just like overflowed from there. They started doing art installations in the city and making it a place where people thought it was beautiful to come to. And suddenly they had tourists and things that are natural to their community. They had these auctions that they were known for livestock. And they were, like a big pole barn of livestock coming in. And they said, this is our culture, this is our community. How can we start educating other people who want to understand our culture, what the livestock auction is all about? And then they started to create opportunities for people who are tourists and enjoying the art within the community to learn about the industry and what happens in a auction of livestock and all that kind of stuff, so that they could attend and just watch. And I think that that was something that was revolutionary to me, because I realized up until this point, I hadn't put the connection together about art and economic development and building a community that people want to go to because it's just frankly beautiful to look at. And honestly, my whole life I had been guilty of this and I hadn't even realized it. I would put things on my bucket list of places I wanted to go because they were gorgeous. And not just the scenery, but the actual things people were doing with buildings and with installations of galleries and museums and all this stuff. And I realized, why is it that we don't have more of this? How can we do that? And so, I'm so influenced by data. And the thing is, there's 3 parts, and this is not mine. I stole this from somebody else, so go with me on this. But there's 3 legs to a stool for a community when it comes to a town. You have your economic development, which is your businesses and the industry. And then you have community development, which is the connection, the people feel belonging and they are getting out and doing things together. And then you have your workforce development, which is people actually having jobs and finding jobs and having a place to make an income. And I love all 3 of those things. That's what I do in my other business. And so how do I take my passions and then put them into something that I'm excited about? Well, an art gallery does that for me, because every single artist, if you really look at them at their core, they're a creator, but they're also an entrepreneur. They have to be in order to get paid to do what they do and to survive. And I think we have the stigma is the starving artist, but that's because a lot of artists are not good at business. And quite honestly, they get taken advantage of a lot by people who know more things about business. And so how do you protect those people and set them up to be successful entrepreneurs that can really not be starving? So that's something that to me is important. And then also that community development. I think the artist community in general, people who have visions and dreams of what something can look like in a new, fantastic way, when you get them together, there's this synergy that happens. And I was just talking with somebody recently about this. When you have one person and they're doing something, they make something beautiful, right? But then you have 2 people and they kind of like go back and forth on, maybe I like your idea, maybe I don't. But when you put 3 people in the room, it's just boom, they start adding and creating and saying, oh, what about this? Can we add this? And there's just something beautiful about community in creating new concepts and new art forms that are just revolutionary in a lot of ways. And come about to create really cool things. And I think we've kind of lost that in our culture because we're so focused on manufacturing as fast as we can to get it for the cheapest possible. And we've lost the art part to the point that, I mean, we don't even do brick walls for a lot of these new buildings. They're just cast molded to look like brick somewhere off site and painted to look like brick. And then they just pop up a whole wall. And masonry is actually an art form. And so is woodworking. And so is craftsmanship in so many other industries. And when we look at the old things that were built, people took pride in what they did. And they had purpose behind it. And I just got the opportunity to listen to some fantastic people at this last conference that I went to. And one of the things that they talked about was you go to a place and you go to the first set of people working on a project and you say, what are you doing? And they say, well, we're moving dirt. And then you go to the next couple guys and you say, what are you doing? And they say, well, can't you see we're building a wall? And then you get to the last group of people and you say, what are you doing? And they stop for a moment and their tears start welling in their eyes and they say, can't you see we're building a cathedral? And that's the difference when you have purpose and you have art. If you're making something beautiful and you're passionate behind it and you're also trying to make an impact in the world with what your craft is, I just see that as so much more valuable than slapping a business together. And that's not what I want this space to be. I want it to be purposeful, creating community and helping people find value in the work that they do. So I think an art gallery for me hits every single box that I'm passionate about. And I think it gives me an opportunity to celebrate other artists that have been really struggling, honestly, in a world that has devalued them. And it's not just locally. I think as a nation, we have devalued what we purchase every day and the process in which that item was made, to the point that we choose price first and foremost over knowing whether or not that was made with slave labor or in solid, healthy working conditions and all these different things. And, you know, I'm not going to say that like I'm judgmental of that because I'm totally guilty of it in so many ways. So how do we appreciate people that are coming up with these ideas and actually taking the time to truly make beautiful things that are functional and support our life, right? And I think right now in the world today, it's really common, especially in the pottery space, I see this, that it's hard to compete with pricing of your big box retailer because, you know, there's a huge difference behind the process of manufacturing when you have these huge pieces of equipment that are just squishing together or cast molding ceramic versus hand throwing on a wheel or building on a table, and the processing behind creating those pieces of art is different. Functional art, but it's different than what these people are doing in these very, very large facilities. And the happy medium of that. So how do we create art that's beautiful and then commercialize it so that it can be spread everywhere? Because there's only one of you, right? Most larger companies like that you see, Target, Walmart, wherever, they have a lot of art in their stores, but none of it's attributed to anyone. It's some graphic designer somewhere in a back office that put something together and then they slapped it on a product and said, yeah, we're going to manufacture a whole bunch of these. But that person with the initial creativity and their like purchasing of their licensing or whatever, maybe they don't even own rights to it because they're working for a company that they're going to take everything they create and they never get attributed. That person is lost, but they're the artist and they're the creative one. And I think that happens a lot in our society. But the thing is that craftsmanship is something that I really think is the future. I do. I think that craftsmanship is something that needs to be appreciated because the way, if you look at the explosion of the arts period during the Renaissance in Italy, I remember a couple years ago we went to a museum in Hungary, and you know what? The majority of the art in their art gallery was actually from Italy. People had bought it and brought it back with them to Hungary. I mean, fantastic pieces of art. But the majority of them were being made in a place where people were on fire for creating. And everyone who went there bought something to take home with them. And that's magnificent when you think about the economic development and infusion of capital within Italy that happened, right? And if you can create a thriving art community, you create a place where people want to go to and experience for themselves. Because when people create something, there's like a new sense of inspiration for other people. I mean, art can make people cry. Art can move people to a place that they never thought they could go. And I value all those things. But what I also value is taking art and injecting it into education and that workforce development aspect. Because I think that that's where we get stuck. A lot of people say, well, I'm not an artist because I can't paint or draw. But the reality is you may have invented something a long time ago that meets a need that works really well at your house or whatever. But that's art. It's a creation that you've done. And if you can infuse that into applicable ways for other people, it has value. And I'll just give you an example of this. There are some people that are fantastic writers, you know, and in our system today within the education system, we have science, technology, engineering, and math, that STEM aspect. But I argue that when you put art in that and make it STEAM, you've created an engine that is completely different. And here's how I see this play out, right? We have kids in school that are fantastic writers. Well, why are we not allowing them in part of their education to use their skills for real life things that are jobs and say, hey, why don't you write an article for the local newspaper just to try it out and report back on something you experienced, go to an event or whatever and say, hey, this happened, and contribute to society. And when kids can do that and they see I made my mark on the world and people took me seriously as a young person, you feed their potential and they will grow into it. And it is fantastic to see that. Well, and maybe you say, well, I don't want to be a writer forever, but I got to take this class, right? And I have to learn all these things. But what if we took that class and we paired them with a nonprofit that said, yeah, we're not really good at grant writing, but this is who we are. And this is what we want to do in the future. If you had a couple kids get together and write all that down and match it with a grant that they could apply for to support the efforts that they're doing in the community, what a job fit, right? Something that these kids now can see, hey, if that grant proposal was received and they get the funding, look what impact they made in their community. And I am a firm believer that if you infuse purpose into education at a young age and show people you're gifted in this way, and here's how you can use this gift to serve the community, here's how you can use this gift to potentially become a job, people will be encouraged to pursue that further. And I've seen it happen so many times with kids where you say, hey, did you know that that is a skill you can get paid for? And here's an opportunity for you to get paid. And then all of a sudden, these kids are thinking like entrepreneurial thoughts about, well, how could I do that as a business? Or how could I get more of that? And I've seen kids do it with snow shoveling and lawn raking, like, you know, manual skills they have. But those skills transfer into other areas of life. And I just think that the opportunity to create something shows people how they can contribute to the world. And it booms so much more economic opportunity for the community. And not just necessarily economic opportunity where it's like, well, who's going to buy that in our town? Nobody can afford that or whatever. No. I will challenge that to say the internet has released so much opportunity, and the younger generation, when they maximize that, they are making a huge impact. I mean, think about the fact that the majority of kids in elementary, when you start asking them what you want to be when you grow up, there is quite a few of them that will say to you, I want to be a YouTuber. Why is that? Because that's what they see as a financial opportunity that they're seeing other people do. And I'm not saying that that's like the answer, right? Because the statistics on that are probably as good as being a pro football player. But what I am saying is that they're seeing the opportunity to create monetization using the internet and making it a career. So how do we take those interests and make them into something valuable, right? And we're seeing this younger generation do this on their own anyways. They're opening Spotify accounts to upload their music that they made while they were just messing around on their computer or on their phone. You're seeing podcasts created by kids on Anchor because it's a free platform. And I just think we're missing it in rural America. We're missing how we can infuse art and creativity into helping our youth be the next generation that doesn't have to move away to create a living, to be passionate about something, and to create jobs. Now, if you are the average person that I talk to where I live, I'm sure you think that I am very starry-eyed and out there. And that's okay. That's fair. But how do I get so confident in this as a functional thing? Well, I've been doing a lot of experimentation in this. And I've been trying different things and saying, here's my vision. This is what I want to do. How do I create elements of delight? This entire building project to me is honestly a piece of art, even though it's completely functional and you're like, well, where's the art? Well, the thing is, I want to create opportunities for surprise and delight throughout my building that are just naturally part of the building. And do they take time? Are they worth the investment? I think they do take a lot of time. And I also think they're worth the investment. But it's going to be slow. It's not all done yet. This is kind of like my opus, as you will, of art in a lot of ways. But slowly but surely, I've been adding elements. And one of the things I'm going to be doing this year in the city of Chisholm, which I'm super excited about, is, it sounds kind of silly, but I'm going to be putting a mosaic art installation in a pothole. And I know why would I do that, right? It just seems kind of out there. But the reality is that like art creates moments for people to stop and be pleasantly surprised. And I tested this out. I did it in the floor of the bathroom at my building. And sometimes I don't tell people that it's there or whatever. And then all of a sudden, like, I'll be just doing my thing and I have people come and work on the building or whatever. And then they'll come out of the bathroom and they'll say, I really like that mosaic you put in the floor. And they just had a moment, literally a private moment with a piece of art that brought them joy. And they appreciated it. And can you imagine if you create those opportunities throughout just a regular small walk? What kind of opportunity we have in economic development to draw people to where we live. And my whole building is just an experiment in that, and I love it. And I'm sure you're thinking to yourself like, well, how is that going to make any money? Well, quite honestly, the numbers don't really lie. And I've seen this in other people's data within their communities, Lanesboro being one of them. I mean, Google it, look it up, Lanesboro, Minnesota. Did you know they now have an entire lanesboro.com visit website where they're just showing all this stuff of what you can do in their little town? They never had that before. When I listened to their presentation, they did not have all of this stuff set up this way. And they've just continued to grow and grow and grow their opportunities of people visiting their town. And now they're no longer known for just the place you go to sell your livestock. And that's a fantastic case study example of what can be done. And you may think in this moment, well, I want to see the data. And me too, in Chisholm, me too. But what I can tell you is I get super excited because we saw this opportunity to do this with this building before a lot of other people were kind of looking. But the data there was also important to me. The reason we chose Chisholm, and I've kind of talked about this in picking a brick and mortar location, but we looked through older data that other organizations had done, and they noted that the two populations in our region that were growing in population were Eveleth and Chisholm, with younger people and families. And we thought, man, that's an opportunity because younger people mean there's a workforce. And two, it means that people want to go to those communities. So people want to be there. So how do we invest in a place that people want to be in? And as we started looking at opportunities, that was one of the reasons we started scouting out this area. And the reason why we chose Chisholm over Eveleth in this particular reason was because of the demographic that we were looking at for the tourism population and its direct proximity to the Redhead Mountain Bike Trail that just was built. And actually, they just got a bunch more money to finish off the rest of it. We've seen so many people come from all over the United States to mountain bike this trail. It's one of, honestly, the most difficult trails in the nation right now. And people from all over are coming here with their really expensive bikes to try to ride this trail. And if you even look a little bit further down, here's another case study example with what's happening with specifically the mountain bike community. The Crosby Ironton area. Their downtown was so dead after mining kind of left. And I believe they don't have any active mines right now, but they have a lot of iron ore pits and places that they built mountain bike trails out further. And people just started investing in the town. Entrepreneurs started creating a place of tourism. And that community is completely transformed. And the more people that are entrepreneurs that have a vision to create a downtown that's walkable and has shops and feels inviting, the more the town will grow as a location. I literally have people from California that told me that they've been there because they wanted to check it out and they went on their vacation to mountain bike. So between the two towns, we settled on Chisholm because of that addition to the community and how conveniently located it was. So this podcast is getting a little long, so I'm going to kind of wrap up with the gawk portion of this episode. But I really wanted to talk about this. A lot of people have said, okay, Becca, like that's cool, but why are you doing it as a business and not a nonprofit? Most arts organizations are nonprofits. Why did you decide that this is the way to go? And I would argue yes and no. There are a lot of nonprofits that do represent artists, and I think that that's great. But there are also a lot of artist collectives. And, I tried to look up a lot of different things about, is it a co-op? Is it like this? What kind of model is it, right? And a collective is a lot of places, that's what they have. And it's where they're professional artists and they agree to have a space together. But then there's also a consignment model. There's also a rent your wall model. There's so many galleries, and I've been to so many across the United States and just asked them how are you guys doing this? Who's all here? How did you hear about it? All of these different questions. And I just thought there was really valuable information that I was receiving from people. And one of the things that I really took away from a nonprofit organization that represents arts and tries to create art within the community, educational opportunities, they said, one of the biggest challenges we have is that people will come to us and say, we want you to put on a class, we want to do this thing. And they say, great. So they find an artist and they say, would you like to put on this class? They help them go through the process of seeing how much it's going to cost for their time, how much it's going to be to put on the class and get all the materials. And then they come back and they say, this is how much it's going to cost. And pretty typically they'll say, well, that's too expensive. But aren't you guys a nonprofit? And people think that because you're a nonprofit, you should do things for cheap. And then all of a sudden they devalue artists. And there can become this pressure almost to shame people into working for less than what they can afford to do. And that is really actually common, not even just with nonprofits, but even in larger projects, because people just have no idea what the cost and the time is to do some of these things well and professionally. And so that was one of the reasons I just said, you know what? it's going to be for profit, because it's a lot easier to say to someone, I'm sorry, but that just does not make financial sense for us. And it's not worth that person's time and ensuring that they can make a living. So there you go. There's the vision and everything that we've been working on. I know that it seems a little bit like pie in the sky in so many ways, but I'm so excited to see where this goes. And even in the process of getting there and meeting artists and coming up with new concepts and sharing resources, understanding different techniques and ways of doing things within art or just in business, it's been fantastic. And I will say that I have learned so much through this experience. I couldn't even begin to tell you how valuable that has been for me. So if you are interested in being a part of something like that or wanting to check it out, you can do that and visit us in Chisholm. And did I tell you that this building also is super exciting for me, because we are putting in, wait for it, a podcast studio on the second floor. So that's been like a dream of mine, and it's finally coming to reality in so many ways. So we'll actually have a permanent home for Business Talk Sister Rock as well. So if you've enjoyed this episode or any of the other ones that I've ever produced, please give it a review on whatever podcast platform you listen on, or share it with a friend and tell somebody about it, because the more we get in front of people, the more we get connections and opportunities to meet new fun guests that can bring their knowledge to all of the listeners. And so thank you for doing that if you are, and thanks for tuning in.